Thinking about your first truck lease? On today's episode of Driven Too Far, we're talking about the good, the bad, and what to walk away from. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Welcome back to Driven Too Far. Today we're talking about truck leases, what's in them, what's not in them, and how to make sure you don't get smoked by the fine print. Because whether you're a brand new lease operator or somebody that's just lease curious, it can definitely hit you in the wallet if you don't know what you're doing. So let's just start out and talk about what is a lease in the first place. A lease is basically you renting that piece of equipment for a certain amount of time. It's not any different if you've ever rented a car or a pickup truck. It's very similar to that. There's certain periods. It can go anywhere from 12 months up to 60 months. You make a monthly payment on the lease, just like you would any other vehicle. And at the end of the lease, you probably have some options. You might be able to buy that vehicle out from the lease, or you turn the lease back in. So why would you want to consider a lease in the first place? I know some lease programs definitely get a bad rap, but it has more to do with probably the individual carriers and how they have the leasing program set up. But the reason you might consider a lease is because it's such a low entry to getting into truck ownership. You don't have to have a lot of money down a lot of times. Many times the carrier themselves do in-house leasing programs, so you're not actually working through a bank or financial institution. So sometimes they don't even require money down. They'll let you into the program. You have reasonable truck payments usually. A lot of times it gives you access to newer vehicles. And if we were being honest, where's your credit? Many times drivers don't have the credit they would need to go out and purchase a $200,000 vehicle. But these lease programs allow you to get into that. Many times the carrier-sponsored lease programs, they're leasing you brand new vehicles. You can get into it for nothing down, maybe $1,000, $2,000 down, but it's a very low cost to entry there. But like with all good things, what are the catches, right? So the things you have to worry about in a lease program is there might be mileage caps, meaning you can only drive the vehicle so many miles within that time frame that you're renting it. A lot of times they are, the vehicle has to be turned back in a certain condition. And a lot of drivers probably don't realize that or recognize that, but that's the fine print we're talking about. When there's damage beyond normal wear and tear. So if there's body damage to the vehicle, maybe you've run the tires down on the rear axles and you don't have much tread left. A lot of times you either have to replace that stuff before you turn the vehicle in, or there's going to be some sort of charge back to you to bring that vehicle back up to a certain spec that's all in the fine print of the contract, so they can turn around, sell it, release it, whatever they're going to do with it. Other things that you need to look out for in the fine print, when you're talking about the monthly lease payments, what does that payment actually cover? A big one that varies from company to company or carrier to carrier is the maintenance side of stuff. Some companies might offer a lease program where the maintenance is included. You're likely going to pay a higher rate to do that, but it might be in your best interest as well. We think about maybe leasing vehicles that are still under warranty, which I would absolutely recommend. That's a great thing to do. Again, when you're leasing things, maybe it's 12 months, 2 years, whatever that lease agreement is, if that vehicle's still under the factory warranty, first of all, you're getting a newer vehicle in the first place, but if and when things go wrong, you have some sort of backup there. We used to run an older program. It was called a lease purchase program. So what we do is we'd run the vehicle in the fleet for the first 3 or 4 years of its life. And instead of turning it back in, we'd take that vehicle, we'd buy it out, and then we'd turn around and resell it or release it to a driver as a lease purchase. The idea was then that the driver was actually building equity with every monthly payment. And at the end of that lease term, whether it's another 3 years, they were physically going to own the truck. We would then sign the title over and they were the new owner of the vehicle. The struggle, or at least the risk with that, the lease purchase, is while sometimes the payment's lower, you're actually building the equity and you can see the future, you're going to earn something or you're going to own it rather. The maintenance cost is likely going to go up. So again, every year, especially beyond year 3 and 4, the vehicle maintenance cost does go up, and you're going to be responsible for all the repairs on that truck that probably now has 3, 4, 500,000 miles on it. One of the things you want to watch out for in the fine print is the insurance. Again, it's going to vary from company to company, but what kind of insurance do you need to carry on that vehicle? If you lease that vehicle back onto a carrier, they may cover your liability insurance while you're under dispatch, you're under load. But beyond that, a lot of times the driver is required to carry something called bobtail insurance or non-trucking liability. So that means if you're in between jobs, you drop the trailer at the terminal and you bobtail home, you take the tractor home, and something happens when you're bobtailing home, that's what that insurance would cover. We require something called occupational accident insurance. Works a lot like a work comp. So we want to know that if you happen to get hurt on the job, there's going to be something there for you to fall back on. And the other one is just the general insurance on the truck itself. So if it gets damaged, if it hails, if you got a broken windshield, those type of things, then you have the avenue to get that fixed as well. What about early termination clauses, right? So generally when you sign the lease, that company or carrier is going to hold you to the term. So if you sign a 12-month lease, you better be ready to work 12 months for them. That's why it's such an important commitment. And if something changes in your life and you have to give the truck back, you have to get out of trucking, something's changed at home, you might be prepared to pay some kind of penalties for that. They're generally in the fine print. A lot of companies do that. I know on occasion where we've run lease programs, we've taken a truck back. Maybe a driver had to, like we just said, get out of the industry for whatever reason, turn the truck back in, but they really didn't pay attention to what condition they were turning the truck back in. In a lot of cases, if the driver would just clean the truck, clean it up, detail it as best they can, especially if they had a pet in the vehicle, get the dog hair out, make sure you're shampooing the carpets, get any stains or smells out that you can. That type of effort could literally save you thousands down the road when you turn the vehicle in, because if the carrier has to turn around and do it, they're not going to do it themselves. They're going to turn around and give it to a professional that's going to charge them an arm and a leg to detail that truck. They're going to turn around and bill that back to you. So sometimes things change, right? And maybe your circumstances, you need to get out of the truck, but take your time. Make sure you understand where you're at with the lease contract, what's going to happen if I turn this thing back in early, and what can I do to minimize any of those extra add-on type costs that I'm likely going to get hit with. So let's take a minute and talk about some of the most common questions we get on lease programs. The first one is, can I customize the truck, right? We don't even get through signing the papers yet. And I think their heads are spinning about what chrome shop they're going to stop at. What are they going to do to this truck? But just pump the brakes a little bit right there. In most cases, you cannot customize the truck. What I tell drivers is, there's some things you can get away with to personalize it a little bit, but make sure whatever you do to it can be undone without leaving any damage or evidence of it. So don't be drilling holes in the dash. Don't be, hanging a big chrome visor on it. You think about sometimes drivers, they want lights on the inside to make it look cool at night or something, but they use a double-sided tape that when you try to take it off, it peels the paint off stuff. So you got to be thinking about those things. For the most part, you need to kind of leave them alone. Don't do anything too crazy. Now, at some point in your career, hopefully you'll be to the point you actually own and buy the truck. Then you can do anything you want with it. But again, the stuff's usually in the fine print. If you turn back in a truck and it's got, call it interior damage because you customized something in it, they're going to replace that cabinet panel. They're going to replace that dash piece or that seat cover, whatever that is, and it's going to be billed back to you, unfortunately, and it's never cheap. Another question we hear a lot, who pays for the repairs, right? So for the most part, you as a contractor, that's part of the responsibility you're taking on in the lease and the ownership of the vehicle, is that you're now responsible for the payment, the fuel, the insurance, and the maintenance on the vehicle. So when it comes to repairs, it's probably going to fall back on you. Now, we've done some recent episodes about preventive maintenance and how important that is. It's really important now that you're a truck owner that you stay on top of that, because if you forget or you bypass the maintenance that's due, it's like, oh, I'll do it later, don't worry about it. It will catch up with you, and when it catches up with you, it'll be a lot more expensive than if you would have just done it on the schedule in the first place. I think this is a great time to, again, talk about making sure you're considering a truck that's under warranty, factory OEM warranty. There may be some cases too where you can lease an older truck and you can get extended warranty beyond the original factory warranty. That might be something you want to consider depending on what you're doing, what the payment looks like, what's the history of the truck. Has it been well maintained? Are you willing to take a risk on that? Or do you really not know how well it's been maintained? Has it had 6 drivers through it and it's 3 or 4 year life? Maybe it's not in that great a shape, or you just don't want to take the risk. So there are some aftermarket warranty programs out there that are available. It might be worthwhile at least looking into those when you're doing all your research. So do the lease payments help me buy the truck? Well, in most cases, no. Again, it's a lease. You're renting it. It's no different than like an apartment, right? You lease an apartment. You spend money. Here's my monthly payment. I get to live in it for 30 days, et cetera, et cetera. And usually that's a 12-month lease on an apartment, something like that. But you're not building equity. That's the important part you need to understand, unless you're in a lease purchase. And again, the carrier will talk to you about that. That's very different. You are actually building equity as you're making your monthly payments. And at the end of the lease, there's probably going to be something like a $1 buyout. But again, most of those can be a little bit older trucks and maybe something that's not as new under that factory warranty like we're talking. So for the most part, you're not building equity on the truck when you're doing a lease. One thing I'd mention too is don't confuse the lease contract with the carrier contract. So usually when you go to a carrier and you do a lease, there's 2 pieces or 2 documents you'll end up signing. The first is the finance piece of it. That is you and the lease agreement for making payments on the truck, what's required of you while you have control of the truck. And then again, when you turn it back in, what kind of condition does it have to be in? The other one is the carrier contract, and that's the act of you signing that vehicle back onto the carrier to haul freight for them. So that would be pretty common. You run into 2 lease agreements. Take time to read them both. It's a lot of lawyer talk. If you need help with stuff like that, find somebody that can help you that can understand that, because I hate to call them gotchas, but that's kind of where those things live, is in all that lawyer talk. And if you're not familiar with how they phrase some of those things, there are some things in there that can be harmful, or if you're not aware of them, can come back to bite you in the end. And unfortunately, as long as you sign the contract as is, those contracts are usually enforceable by the law if they need to be. So this is where they kind of get you. Other areas where they might, maybe you throw a red flag or they kind of can get you a little bit, is in the lease, they don't give you any itemized list of things that they're deducting for. Make them do that. And if they won't give you a specific list, make sure it's clear before you sign that, because nothing's worse than a pushy salesman trying to get you to sign off on a lease. And it's like, oh, don't worry about that, it's good. And then a year later, you turn back in the vehicle and they go, oh, you didn't do this, so we've got to charge you back for this. And then you're like, wait a minute, that guy, the sales guy, said I didn't have to worry about that. Well, that's not what's in writing. So that's what they're going to go off of as the contract. So if you need things specifically spelled out, take the time to do that, get it in writing, and make both parties sign that, especially if it's a change in the contract in any way. Sometimes you run into very vague wear and tear type definitions. So when you turn the vehicle back in, it says reasonable wear and tear. Well, what's reasonable? Everybody's version can be a little bit different. So that can be a place of contention as well. Make sure you understand what that is. Ask them to give you specific examples. If it's tears in the interior, Is it in a seam where it's clear it was just from using the seat, or is it a cigarette burn, or is it a tear from a knife or something like that? Those are obviously going to be items that you probably are going to have to repair or fix. How about the paint? Is it because I ran into something and scratched it, or can I tell that the paint is starting to peel off because it was a bad factory paint job? Those would be different. You need to know the difference between those. The big one really is the tires. So make sure it gives you an actual tread depth, minimum tread depth on the tires when you turn it back in. That way everybody can measure it and we can agree on whether it's in compliance or not. Mileage clauses with big penalties. Man, I did this probably the first time I ever leased a pickup truck. Didn't even really think about it and just drove the truck as I needed it, right? And by the time the 2-year lease was up, I was considerably over the miles that was in the lease. So what they'd said in the lease is basically for every mile you go over 24,000 miles or whatever it happened to be at the time, you're going to pay so many cents, so many dollars per mile. So it ended up racking up another couple $1,000s that if I wanted to give the pickup back, I basically had to write them a check for the over mileage. And instead of doing that, I ended up buying the vehicle outright because I thought that just made more sense. But anyways, the mileage thing can be a challenge. Now, you as a professional driver, you know how many miles you're going to run each year. You should have a rough idea. Are you a 100,000 mile guy, 120,000 mile guy? Those things make a difference. So make sure whatever vehicle and the terms you're leasing it under makes sense for the work you're about to do. What about that pushy sales guy, by the way? Hey, buddy, you better sign it today or it's going to be gone. I got 3 more guys out here wanting to lease this truck. If that's the case, walk away. Let them have it. Don't cave into the pressure. I know you're excited. Maybe it's the first time you're going to be an owner-operator and you really want to do it, but don't get caught up in that. The reality is this is a big decision for you. You're about to be a small business owner, independent contractor. You need time to think through this and make sure this is the right thing for you to do at this time. Back when I started lease programs probably 15, 20 years ago at a different company, I was always part of orientation. So as the drivers came in, I would do my part in orientation. And one of the things I recognized pretty fast is you get to know the drivers. They tell you where they've been, where they come from, who they work for, that type of stuff. And there was this common theme that kept popping up, and it happened to be from a couple bigger type refrigerated carriers at the time. But they would put these drivers through their own driving school. And then when they graduated from driving school and they're ready to go solo, all of a sudden they would tell them, oh gosh, we don't have any company trucks available, but if you want to lease a truck from us, we can get you going today. And that was the game they played. The problem with that was this guy's got 6 weeks of training. He has no business trying to figure out how to be an owner-operator, operate a small business. He doesn't even know what trucking's like yet. He's not even been out on the road by himself yet. So there's some of those types of things out there. If you work for somebody and that scenario kind of happens and they try to push you into a lease, man, I'd walk away from that. That just doesn't sound like a good game plan at all to me. A good lease is really a partnership. It's a partnership between you and the carrier. It's not a trap, right? So we offer lease programs because we know that's what drivers want. There's a handful of drivers out there that is what they would like to do, is they want to step from a company truck, be a company employee, into independent contractor, owner-operator type stuff. And the lease programs can be a great stepping stone for you to do that when the time's right. And then make sure you're checking out the lease program to make sure it's a good lease program and it's not going to take advantage of you as a driver. So how do you know? You talk to people. If their lease program has been around, they've got lease drivers in the fleet now. You may run into some people on social media groups or something like that have previously worked for that carrier. Hey, what was your experience like with their lease? Is it everything they said they're going to be? The one thing I would caution you about is keep in mind that the people you talk to are going to have a variety of experiences. Because the one thing I know is that our lease program is the same for all of our drivers. The only thing that might vary is depending on which truck they pick. Their payment might be a little more, a little less, something like that. But the pay, the accessorial pay, the safety requirements, the maintenance requirements, all those things are the same. So even in our own fleet, we have some people that are wildly successful with a lease program, and we have some people that maybe aren't any better off than they were as a company driver. So keep that in mind as you talk to people. You're going to pick up on that, and you really want to talk to the guys that have had success with it, and then ask them why. What are you doing? How do you run each week? How do you handle your maintenance expenses? What has made you successful? How much do you put away? Who's your tax guy? That could make a big difference as well. Then before you sign, make sure you get all your questions answered. It's always about the what ifs, right? So sometimes the things that are going to happen to you or that you're going to experience as a driver are not necessarily in either one of those contracts you're about ready to sign. It's kind of the what ifs, I always say. What if this happens to me? What if I get sick or my wife gets sick and I need to take a certain amount of time off the road? What if I have a family vacation that we take every Christmas and I'm off for 2 weeks? How do I handle the payments on those trucks? What if the tractor has a major mechanical failure? Is the warranty actually going to cover that? And if it does, great. But what do I do to make a living while that thing's down for 4 weeks getting a new engine put in it? So those are the kind of questions you need to ask. Be very curious, put a lot of thought into it before you have the conversations, and make sure you're talking to somebody you can trust. You feel like that's probably giving you really straight answers. At Chief Carriers, we've worked very hard at our lease program, and it's not perfect by any means, but we do listen to our drivers and we set it up for success. And that's really what our focus is, through the education and transparent conversations that we try to have with drivers. We want you to be successful, because what happens if you're not? What happens if you have an awful experience? You're going to go talk. You're going to tell people that you didn't have a good experience with us. So as long as you're working for a reputable carrier and they have a good reputation in the industries, ask about their turnover, things like that, I think you have a really good chance of making a lease successful for you if you approach it correctly. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. At Chief Carriers, we focus on our drivers' success. To learn more, check out the show notes.